For more resources, visit rymonline.org.
The Local Youth Worker is a daily podcast that's centered on 5 questions each week. Ranging from the practical to the professional, we're looking for answers to the questions you're asking. Whether you're in full-time, part-time, or even volunteer youth ministry, this podcast is for you.
All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm John Parrott. I'm here with Jonathan McGuire, assistant pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Belzona, Mississippi. Yesterday we talked about some of the best things that Jonathan's done in ministry and some very helpful things. If you didn't hear that, be sure to go back. But then as we were finishing, we were actually getting into our question for the day, and that's what are some of the worst things that you've done in ministry, some of the biggest mistakes that you've made, and obviously not just kind of sharing our mistakes, but what are some things the Lord has taught you in the midst of those mistakes?
It's a hard question because it requires exposing who I am and my guilt. Mm-hmm. And as a child, the worst thing I thought could ever happen to me was to come up short publicly. Mm. And I think I have carried that over into adulthood. I know I have carried that over into adulthood, whether it's a refusal to publicly admit wrong or anything else. Dealing with students who are perpetually thinking they're right has made my own sanctification all the more necessary. I think a couple of the greatest mistakes I've made are fed by that lifelong problem I have. The first would be, it's easy to talk about the love of God until there's people in the room. Mm. And as soon as people are in the room, especially students who you know are lying to your face, or who you are so desperate to see their own hypocrisy and to accept the mercy of Christ, and they just can't see it. And there's nothing else you can do in all your strength to make them see it. It can be easy to get frustrated.
Absolutely.
And I used to preach and teach in a way that was angry. And so you're sitting here talking about the love of Christ, but you're saying, the love of Christ, gosh!
And banging on the pulpit.
Yeah, taking my shoe off like Khrushchev at the UN, banging on the podium and demanding that everybody pay attention. That's the opposite of what Paul said in the New Testament, which is by whatever means he could, as long as it was not manipulative or anything else, of course, he was appealing and pleading and begging and showing the rich greatness of Christ to people who were placing all their confidence in the poor things of earth. And it's just been a constant struggle to talk about Jesus in a way that showed that he was my treasure rather than getting accepted by what the youth were doing. I am not there to be accepted by them. I'm there to make my appeal to them on behalf of Christ. And if I am not showing that my greatest treasure is Christ, then something's wrong, and I'm placing my pursuits in things that will inevitably leave my soul impoverished, and that doesn't make any sense, but that's been a huge problem. The second one, which I mentioned previously, was it's real easy to stack up a lot of activity. I'm in a small town. We have about 5 stoplights, and usually 3 of them work. I see fewer cars in a week in my town than I see in a day when I'm in the capital, which is about an hour and a half away. So there's a ton of things to do, and there is never enough hours in the day to do them all. But I have children, and I have a wife, and if I do not learn how to say no, and if I lack the backbone to say no, it's not only because I'm scared of possibly losing my job, and a lot of young ministers in a new job damage their family because they're scared of letting the church down.
Absolutely.
So it's not only a fear of letting down the church or a fear of losing my job, it's also not realizing that I cannot save. And God has called me first and foremost to the greatest stewardship a man could ever have, which is children and a wife. They have to be my priority. I'm very thankful to be at a church with a session that actually asks me questions like, are you neglecting your family? But it's easy for me to tell them, no, I'm absolutely doing what I need to do with my family, but I'm really only home 10 hours a week. We work 6 days a week in our town. It's a farming town. Some of the farmers are required at harvest time to work 7 days a week. It's very difficult then to, clock in at 9 o'clock, or as a youth pastor, perhaps 1 p.m., until the kids are just getting out of school, as some guys do it, right? It's easy simply to clock in and clock out. And then at home, you're calling students or inviting them over to your house. And so your wife never sees you. She just sees the youth pastor. Mm-hmm. Your children never see daddy coloring with them. They see daddy going to other people's games. And drawing a line in the sand and saying, to quote the historical line, "This far I will go no further," is an absolute necessity. We have to learn, as I think it was as the book put it, we have to learn boundaries. And a minister who doesn't have boundaries is a man who doesn't understand how Christ protects his own family and his own church. That's been a big problem I've struggled with over the years. But my wife has been patient, and I have had family and friends who have spoken very clearly to me and asked me to step back. And it's been the hardest thing I've ever done, because I think I'm finding my achievements in what I achieve rather than what Christ has done for me. Mm-hmm. And it's a humbling lesson, and I don't like to be humbled. So I'd say those are the two greatest mistakes I've made.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Good reminders for sure. Just curious, you said that you've got a session that asks you some of those hard questions. Do they also encourage and guard days off? And do they say, okay, are you taking vacation? Are you getting this number of days off?
Yeah, it's a blessing to be at a church that does factor into my calling vacation time. Now, my family my parents live 1,000 miles away and they can't travel, so we take the whole month of October and we're gone. So they allow that, but that's also been modeled by the pastor who's been at our church for 37 years. His family lives in South Africa, so he is able to spend 5-6 weeks in the summer while I cover things at home and go there, and when I'm gone in October, he covers for me. So the session understands that we've given this man vacation, and they honor that, and they want to be honored. They want my time while I'm there to be valued and valuable to them. We want to be watching out and serving one another, of course, as the church is supposed to do. But it's also an interesting community in that when it's hunting season, and I don't hunt, but others do. When it's hunting season, there will be people who will come into work at 10 o'clock and they'll just say, I was turkey hunting. Now, of course, we take care of our responsibilities and whatnot, but the church is okay with me going home at 1 o'clock. And if I have a Bible study that goes through supper and I won't get home till 9, I'll take that time off in the afternoon. So I'm not functionally working a 14-hour day and my family doesn't see me.
Yeah.
So they understand that. Now, I mean, ministry is not a, Dolly Parton 9-to-5 job. It's not a 40-hour-a-week thing. You never know when you will be called to dip into yourself and into the strength Christ provides like never before. So you have to manage your time. And it's one of those callings where there's not a lot of people standing over you checking an hourly box. So it's been a challenge, but they're okay with, go home, go get some rest. You got to come back tonight, that kind of a thing. Yeah. And I don't feel the pressure at this church as I have at other churches in the past to present a timesheet, so to speak.
Yeah, that's good to be in that type of environment where you've got that kind of staff for sure. And I know as you're saying this too, a book that I've referenced on this podcast before, and one that's very helpful is Zeal Without Burnout by Christopher Ash. And just talking about being cautious and guarding yourself. I mean, he says kind of a central truth of the book is that we are but dust. And that can sound kind of discouraging and humbling, but at the same time, liberating.
It's absolutely liberating. That's the word that I had in my head.
Yeah. And so it's just encouraging to be in a church that would encourage you to say, hey, take comp time that day if you've got a late Bible study, or take your time, take a day off and all of that. Because as Christopher Ash kind of says, we have to have energy to be able to give it away in service to Christ. And if we're just burning the candle at both ends, we're going to burn out. So.
I would only close by mentioning this. If someone is an introvert in ministry and they do not find time to be alone, they will come home angry. And an introvert has to understand that he has a great deal to give the church, but he has to understand how to do that in a way that does not destroy himself. And extroverts in ministry have to understand that not everybody wants to be the life of the party. or not everybody wants to be fueled by being seen in public, and they've got to be sensitive to those on their staffs who are introverts and need to draw away for a time. Now, I'm a severe introvert, and I have to figure that out in a town where there are demands on everybody to work more than one job. There's just not enough of all of us to go around. There's not enough dust. But we have to watch ourselves lest we fall, and we find in our own hearts an evil and unbelieving heart causing us to fall away from the living God. Mm-hmm. He's made us, our sin natures have infected us, but he's also restoring us. And there's a fine line to walk there between acting as if we're already redeemed and can do everything, and remembering our fallen and weak states.
Yeah. And that's excellent, Jonathan. That's very helpful. Anything else you want to add to that?
I'm okay. That's good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks again, Jonathan.